Well, hello there. Hope this video finds you all doing well. And it is the 20th of January. We're marching on into the year 2021. And Pastor Phil and I we have chances to talk, obviously, serving together in the ministry. And in the course of our visits, sometimes subjects come up. And so we thought we'd get together today and just give you maybe a pastor's perspective and maybe some information that some of you may or may not have about the situation in the church today. And in particular, 3 points that we were going to be talking about today would be first, this process of finding a pastor to replace me. I'm stepping down at the end of February. And that may be a question that some people might have. How is that going, or what's it look like? And then we might move then into the subject itself of what it is to serve as a pastor, and then close it up with some personal thoughts about us moving forward from here. So I guess one of the things that prompted and really stuck with me is that you mentioned that you had a conversation with someone in the church about, first of all, this what we call it, the quest of finding a pastor. So.
Yeah, a person came and asked me if, who is going to make the final decision as to the pastor, who the pastor will be to replace Pastor Ron. And I was a little bit taken back because this person's a member of the congregation, but I think maybe in the midst of all that's been going on this year, this has sort of taken such a back seat type of thing that wasn't really even thinking about who's going to make this final decision. Are the pastors going to do it, the board? And I said, well, no, ultimately it's the congregation who makes a decision who will serve them as a pastor. But so that was something that sort of, I wasn't taken back and shocked, but it was just sort of like, well, maybe we haven't talked too much about this then. If a person in our congregation doesn't really know how, and that's not an affront against the board or against Walt not making the proper announcements or whatever, but it's just what's swirling around us right now.
The shadow of this whole last year has, like you said, put it on the back burner of the stove, or maybe even slid it off the stove. And so we haven't, because my wife had a similar discussion with somebody, and they just said, we just haven't had time as a congregation together. We haven't had meals. We haven't been together that much on a personal level to talk about this. So maybe people are just like, what's going on? So we might give them a perspective, fill in on what we see the process and how it's going.
And just speaking for myself, you can speak for yourself also, but I do not have, I guess I will put you in there, we do not have any more say in this than any other member of the congregation. Ultimately, when it comes down to it at the annual meeting or whenever this is decided, I don't have 10 votes. And everybody else has one, like we maybe do in our home with our children, So, but having said that, I did have a voice in the beginning. We met with the board. There were numerous names that were brought forward, and some were eliminated, just obvious eliminations for various reasons. The board knows that, Pastor Ron, we know that, but we're keeping these things pretty close to us. So we're not and I trust that the board is too.
One may have just responded, I can't do it.
Others, others for reasons that we know about in their personal life, not questionable lifestyles or anything like that, but just things that they're dealing with, and one of the things that was asked of me quite often was, are you able to work with this person? Now, Pastor Ron and I have had a good working relationship, if you call it that, for 15, 16 years, whatever now, 15 years I guess it is, going on 16, and that is something that is of huge, real high consideration. But it hasn't been the only thing. Rest assured, the people that are left, I'm feeling comfortable with them. Paul and Pastor Nicholas and Pastor Chuck, I'm obviously comfortable with working with them. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't be in the final.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's vital.
Yeah.
It is. You can't have a divided pastor.
Sure,
I mean, that's
sure.
just common sense. So things like that have been taken into consideration. The board.
So we're in the process now, right?
We are.
We Paul spoke last Sunday. He's going to do a Bible study tonight, so we get, not that we don't know Paul, but the board figured he would get equal, what would you say, exposure
Sure.
as Nick and Chuck will be here in the next 2 weekends, respectively, for us to get to know them and so on. This is the process that the board has been asked to do.
Right. And
For
sadly, again, this could have been done months ago, not the board's fault, not anybody's fault, just the shadow of everything that just pushed this stuff away, sadly. But so now we're kind of just up against it. But you're right, ultimately, I don't have 10 votes either. We all have one. We'll make our choices however that goes in whatever time it happens. And Lord willing, we will find someone who can serve together with you, continue the work of the ministry that is God's work through human beings. And we'll be praying that goes well. And I guess we're kind of getting close to that time.
We are. Yeah, time marches on.
Yeah.
So then why so much angst and so much energy put into a new pastor come? What's the big deal here? And I don't think that people don't think it's a big deal, but there might be some who will just say, "Oh, just vote on it. It's, God will take care of us," and so on, and that's true. But what's the big deal here?
Yeah, it's I think that because of our heritage, maybe our traditions from the Apostolic Lutheran Church, more what they refer to as a lay movement, there's been kind of a little bit of confusion perhaps on some people's parts. Again, not accusing anyone, but to distinguish the difference between someone who might speak, and which is of course the primary purpose of a pastor is to be a preacher, a teacher, to deliver the means of grace, but other preachers do that as well. But the office of the pastor kind of moves into a different realm, quite a different.
Sure.
To begin with, this is full time.
Right.
We spend our lives in the ministry, and what does that entail? Is it just Sunday morning? You see us on Sunday mornings. Many of you, of course, have been with us, met with us. Maybe we've counseled some people, helped them in times of difficulties and in times of joy, doing baptisms, weddings, funerals, etc. But the office of the ministry it's a completely different lifestyle than perhaps some people might even think. So
Sure.
Some of your thoughts on, we don't have to go through what our daily life is like, but it can be a difficult time.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And keeping in mind here as we discuss this, keep in mind the candidates. I don't know what else you call them. That's just what it is. They're not politicking, and neither are we. But the candidates for this office, the ones who have been chosen by the congregation, and we believe have been chosen by God also.
Yes.
God has called them into the ministry. We now are doing our part. They have big changes. Paul, driving an excavator, a dozer. I can relate to that. You can relate to that.
Yeah.
I used to work for a living, and we joke about that. Maybe that's pastor talk.
Yeah.
And coming into this office is totally different than the office in which I labored for 14 years in the home building business.
Right.
It's a different thing. You have different markers for success. At the end of the day, you can't check something off and say, "Well, I completed that."
No.
You might say that after you finish a sermon. Well, I finished the sermon. Well, there's other things coming. It's like standing at the edge of the ocean and the waves are coming in. It just continues, and you just react to those waves as they come.
That's right. And pray for help and guidance. And sometimes it seems almost impossible to things because we have no idea what's coming.
Sure.
And we don't mean to elevate the position that is so grand that others, like an excavator, I was one. We ran into problems too. Every vocation is vital in God's creation, but this one has particular things that a person needs to be equipped for.
Sure.
Like you said, Paul is a minister, a preacher, known here. We love him dearly. He will have a major change in that respect. He won't be physically moving. He wouldn't be, if I say it that way, as opposed to the other two.
Right.
Who are serving at this time as full-time in the ministry. Smaller congregations would probably be the biggest thing that I would think of. as they serve a much smaller group, but they're busy. I know they're very busy by visiting with them.
And think about the changes that they would undergo by our decision here.
Mm-hmm.
One simple vote or whatever, however that decision is made, not really clear in my mind.
Yeah.
You know, we do things by voting, but for them to uproot their families, sell their homes, move across the country, establish a new residence here, it's a big thing that we're asking. It's not just like voting, and not to disparage or anything. That's not what we're saying. We're just sort of comparing the weight of this decision to vote in an assistant minister who was already serving here. You know, Donnie, John, Brother Jacob, all three of those. We'll vote on them again at the annual meeting. And you know, I'm hesitant to put things on different levels, but I think you know what I mean.
Oh yeah. We're looking, like I said, if we look at Paul going into full-time ministry, it's a huge change.
Yes.
With Nick and with Chuck, it's more of a logistical thing.
Right.
I had that myself. 65 miles is not, with both at the same time. Leaving a secular job and then moving 65 miles, which isn't from Michigan or Minnesota, but it still was uprooting a family and moving and reestablishing yourself. All of this together is tough. We need to be prayerful that God would help guide and direct all of us in this so that we can make this transition, Lord willing, this coming soon in the best way possible, where there's just not much, upheaval or whatever.
Right.
I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah. We're. I'm not going to get political today, but we in this country, the peaceful transfer of power, and that's not power here. Peaceful transfer of responsibility, of servicehood.
Absolutely.
And my prayer has been for years, and yours also, that when we leave, when our time is done here, that the congregation would hardly know the difference.
Absolutely.
What changed? I think there's a different pastor, but we really, this is going to take a whole new flavor here in the church here when we have a new pastor.
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, it may seem on a very small level that it's quite a change, but it shouldn't really be. Right. Because our calling, our vocation is not a personality. It's what we are called to deliver, which is the gospel, the message of Christ crucified for our congregation members as well as us, for the salvation of our souls. That is really what it's all about. That's what we serve.
Sure.
And in the process of that, of course, we're involved in individual lives. We spend time here in the office. We go on visitations. We have many other things. But the office is, it's very different than perhaps a lot of people perceive it to be. And it's pretty hard to explain. We could have a whole video on that.
Sure. And that's why it's a big deal.
It is.
And that's why we should take it. The board, the other last meeting, was very aware of this, that we have to do this carefully. We can't do it hastily. In the midst, as we've already said, in the midst of everything else that's surrounding us, we have to do it. I believe that's their responsibility. They're taking it very real, and I believe the congregation would agree to that. It's not something we do just flippantly.
So, you have the whole process as it's been going. Unfortunately, it hasn't gone as smooth as we'd like because of all the problems. We're talking a little bit now about the ministry itself. One thing I'd like to read, just a passage, it would really fit into this. I know you probably brought it to my attention earlier than I really even thought about it, but earlier today as I was thinking about our visit, remember in Paul's letter to the Corinthians, his second letter, and he talks about what it was like for him. Now sometimes it's hard to compare ourselves to the apostle, obviously, but there's a verse here, but before I read the one that I really want to talk about, he talks about in his journeys. I could go back many verses. Of the Jews, 5 times received I 40 stripes, save one. He was beaten 39 stripes. 5 times. Twice beaten with rods. Once he was stoned. 3 times he suffered shipwreck. A night and a day he was in the deep. In journeyings often, in perils of water and perils of robbers, perils of mine own countrymen, perils of the heathen, perils of the sea, perils of the wilderness, perils in the sea, and perils among false brethren, in weariness and painfulness, in watchings, often in hunger and thirst, in fastings often, in cold and nakedness. And as I'm reading this, it's like, how How could he endure?
Go on.
We see this super apostle and what he went through. God carried him through. But the next little phrase kind of takes you back a little bit. Yeah. He says, beside those things that are without. It's like, those are physical things that I endured.
Yep.
Well, let me read it. That which comes upon me daily, the care of all the churches. It's almost like, those things were there, they are, but every day of my life, I have a concern and a care for the people I serve, God's people. That's the opposite.
That is.
It's the office that...
When you think of the Apostle Paul, and I wouldn't even begin to, compare myself to him in that, but those physical things, he went through them, he endured them, and he came through them, and they are just a memory.
Yeah.
But the care of the churches, it continues. It just does. And then we've talked about that before. We've talked about it at minister meetings. The guilt of not going through something with an individual or family or whatever, and then having to move on and forgetting that. It's always this cloud over you that
should have done more.
Should have done more. Could have done better. What more could I do? I'm not going to make that mistake the next time.
And then you hear things and you worry about things. The last year, has been a real problem for all of our people. We know that. We ourselves personally suffered under it. A lot of the grief and the sorrow and the pain and the uncertainty, political unrest, you name it. Questions are being asked. We carry that. How much, we say to one another, give it to the Lord, and we do. Yes. Paul himself said, beside all those things that are without. My wife has a term or a phrase she'll say, the problem is in the barn. It's kind of a farmer's way of saying, what we're dealing with here is just, animals and tractors and the hay and stuff. It's not our personal here. It's out there. But now, it's heartbreaking at times to be a pastor. It's just heartbreaking because people are suffering and you just feel like you haven't done what you need to do. Right. You never do.
And then even after that, having done all, say, we have been commanded to do. We have unprofitable servants. Yeah. That's really what it comes down to. Yeah. That's what we are commanded to do. Sometimes it's our duty, and we go in, just going through the motions almost, as it is our duty to do this. And that's the human frailty. This doesn't surprise God, though. No, I don't think it does.
It's His way.
Yeah.
Through earthen vessels, jars of clay, broken earthen vessels that are as we are, and everything, every aspect of this office of the pastor. And we're not saying we're the only ones that have this care. There are others too. There are members of our church that carry loads too. But this is the vocation. So, God help us as we, as a congregation, continue to move forward toward that time when we'll make that decision, and that He would guide us, and that He would strengthen and give the gifts needed for that man who will serve in the office, Lord willing, soon.
So, what about life going on? I'm sure people have asked you, people have asked me, what do you think about this? And I said, it hasn't really entered my mind too much. I'm just not really too nervous about it. I'm not really worried about it. And having said that, there's always the other side, on the other hand, Kevya, on the other hand, there's, that isn't to say I haven't appreciated our working relationship, through the last years. That it's been, but I trust that will continue with the new man.
Absolutely.
The new man.
The new man. He'll be new instead of like the old one. No. I have that same thing on the other hand. I look forward to this change in a lot of ways. I'm anxious, not in a bad way. I'm just kind of anxious. What's it going to look like? We have some plans. I'm also anxious for you because I know we've had a great relationship, and my prayer is that that's what you continue to have. Again, seamless in that sense. I will miss being here. I will miss our relationship as it is. I hope I can still stop in once in a while. I haven't asked you, actually.
No.
I'd probably have to make an appointment.
You'll have to make an appointment.
Instead of going and knocking on the door. But, those kind of things. But I'm looking forward to it just as maybe I'll just give a little, because people have asked what I'm
Sure,
going to do. You know,
sure.
the word retirement comes
Yeah,
up, and at
yeah.
first I was like, I don't like that word, you know, because I'm going to continue to work somehow, somewhat. My plans are maybe to do some woodworking, maybe even start a online woodworking business of sorts, you know, to keep busy. That's, you know, kind of the tentative plan at this time. But the short-term plan for Elizabeth and I especially, I've been 39 years in the ministry, 21 full-time here. Very few times, I think the longest vacation we've taken was short of 3 weeks. Although I did have the sabbatical, so I did get that 4 years ago, and that was wonderful. But we're looking forward to the opportunity to go and visit around. So if people, you know, if you notice that, hey, you know, it looks like I just jumped ship, I'm done and I'm out of here, it's not true. We just hope to be able to travel around, go to Claskenai, Castle Rock, you know, different places, Vancouver. And we do have hope. And the older I get, I use that term, Lord willing, more often than I used to. But Lord willing, we have hope to take a trip early this summer and drive through the southern states of the United States and make our way up the eastern seaboard to New Hampshire, where our son Drew lives. He's the only one of our children who's out of the area. They have a granddaughter we haven't even met yet.
Yeah.
And so we're really hoping that that works out for us. So it'll be an extended trip, maybe 4 to 6 weeks. So you may not see us around, but it doesn't mean we just left. It doesn't mean that. We hope to continue our fellowship. And different as that might be, I'm still looking forward to that, to still having fellowship with this one here. And you're going to come to work that Monday or Tuesday?
I'll come to, the next day, and it won't even change offices, I guess. It's just going to be,
It works
you know,
well.
it's just going to be, continue on. Obviously with a new fellow laborer, but that's, if that happens at that time, there may even be a time, period that I'll be working alone with the assistance of our assistant ministers here. I don't, again, I'm not worried about that, concerned about that. It will be okay.
It will be going well.
And, you know, in a few short years, we'll be doing it all over again, unless the Lord returns. You know, my plan is to not be around much longer than a few years. It's just, this isn't a formal thing, but it's just, I've told the board, yes, there's no, it's age. You know, I'll be 64 in a couple months here, so. And when I'm 64, then I'll make a decision.
Sure, It's hard to do. I went through that until talked to a number of people, and I think the board got kind of tired of hearing me talk about it. Just wondering, well, you know, you talk so much about it, but the time does come. And you know, I look forward to your continuing in the ministry. I am thankful for that, for this congregation's sake, not to puff you up or anything, but to keep it a nice, quiet change. And there will be some changes. There's no question.
Oh, yes.
Maybe doing things different. Whoever sits in this office will be different by personality. And I'm a very unorganized sort of person. He may be very organized. All these different traits that would seem to be different. But I hope and pray that I pray that it goes better than it has. You know, just thinking about it. For the congregation's sake, that we are blessed with.
It's God's flock.
It is.
Feed the flock of God among you.
That's
taking the oversight there. And if we keep those exhortations in mind, Paul's, recounting his life, those things are important for us in the ministry.
There's a lot of things. I was going through my computer, some of the things that I had saved, and a lot of counsel to pastors, and some of them very sobering, but some of them very encouraging as well. So anyway, I don't know, that's kind of an overview. I hope it's not too long here, but just a little insight from our perspective on the coming change and how that's going to take place, what the office looks like in a very, very general sense. And your plans
personal thoughts,
and my plans for the future. And we always say, Lord willing.
Yes, that's right.
So God bless you all.
God's peace.